I'm going to go back onto Lucian Freud. I think he is an incredible painter, regardless of his life. But I came across a recent article by Celia Paul, who was one of his lovers, also an artist, and who's sort of written about the relationship and about his treatment of women. And I thought I'd look at it from that point of view. He had lots of children. Oh, you remember I did something on Celia Paul. This was October 21. I did this, a talk about her art as well. So he's acknowledged to have at least 14 of his children, 2 from his first marriage and 12 by various mistresses. So he was quite fecund, I think is the word for it, isn't it? With his first wife.
One word.
It's one word. His first wife was Kitty Garman. We had 2 daughters, Annabelle and the poet Annie Freud. His second wife, he eloped with the Guinness heiress and writer Lady Caroline Blackwood to Paris, where they married in 1953 and they divorced in 1959. And he didn't have any more wives after that. She was the youngest of 7 Garman daughters of a well-off doctor. And as I say, she married Ernest Wishart when she was only 16. And this is a comment from her daughter by Laurie Lee, the poet.
Yeah.
And she said of her mother, Lorna was a dream to any creative artist because she got them going. Let me say that again. She was a natural muse and inspiration. She was a symbol of their imagination. She was nature herself, savage, wild, romantic, and without guilt. On a family holiday in 1937, she saw a young lad with a violin strolling by on a Cornwall beach and apparently said to him, I don't know how true this is, "Boy, come and play for me," she called out. The fiddler was Laurie Lee, and they had a relationship that lasted for years, and the daughter, Yasmin, who gave that earlier quote. So there you can see 2 photographs of her, obviously a very attractive woman in her own right, is that she loved to swim. She would do so anywhere at any time of year and long into her old age. She'd stripped, because she lived till the year 2000, she stripped to her knickers and plunged into 30-foot waves in Cornwall in the winter, or into remote lakes or fast-flowing icy rivers. She'd swim naked in the shallow, weedy water by Arundel, mocking anyone too prim to take off their things and join her. So she was quite adventurous, I think is probably the best way to. And here's a picture of her, Lorna, with a woman with a tulip.
Not very flattering, is it?
No. And these were two of her lovers. So her relationship with Llewellyn Powys, who was a poet, lasted a very long time. And when she was older and she became an ardent Roman Catholic and returned to her husband and lived with him till he died. She burnt all her lover's letters, but kept the one photo she kept was of Llewellyn Powys, the guy on the left, who I think looks fabulous. I wish I looked like him when I was old. He just really looks the part, doesn't he? I think he looks terrific.
So does Laurie Lee.
You need to grow a beard, Bernard.
Yes, obviously that's what I'm missing out on.
He got his hair and beard and top from the DIY Aged Poet kit.
But it's just a fabulous photograph, isn't it, of him? He just looks the absolute poet. There you go. And this is so as I say, his first wife was Kitty Garman, not to be confused with the Garman Wisharts. She was the daughter of Jacob Epstein, the famous sculptor, and her mother. She took her mother's name. She was Kathleen Garman. When he painted this portrait, their marriage was nearing its end. Domesticity made him claustrophobic, and he was searching for a change. So that's
looks like she's strangling the cat.
Well, interestingly, there's somebody called Isabella Beatrix who goes around recreating paintings. I think this is a really, really good one. instead of strangling the cat there, she's holding a smartphone in front of her. I just really like that for no apparent reason.
That's lovely. That's really lovely.
Lovely photo of her.
Works well.
With a cat face.
This is a large interior done after Watteau, which I'll come on to, done in 1981 later on. This is where the artist brought together his chosen muses for the first time. They charted a sizable portion of his life and work, and I'll come on to who they are. But this was part of the programme for when Sotheby's sold this in 2022. And how much do you think the painting sold for? Any guesses?
10 million.
$86 million.
Wow.
God. Oh, that's better.
Gave you a real close-up of it, which I thought was
Yes, absolutely.
But these are the various people who actually were sitting for it. There is Celia Paul on the left, who I will come on to. She'd also met Freud through the Slade some 20 years after Susie Boyd, who's on the right-hand side. Kai is Boyd's son. That's the one in the yellow. He inhabits the position of Piero. He's the subject, Freud asserted. Bella in heels and the striped dress stands in for Piero's mistress, Columbine, her thumb poised upon the mandolin strings in halted serenade. And the child at the bottom is a girl called Star, he was originally going to get his granddaughter May, but he couldn't get hold of her or something. And this is a little sister of one of Ali Boyd's girlfriends. She shatters the fourth wall of Freud's dreamlike restaging, her gaze meeting the viewers and by extension the artist. That's that Star in the bottom. So if you're thinking about the Watteau painting, I thought I'd show you that as well. That's Les Jaloux, the Jealous Ones in 1712. I don't know why he was so taken with that. And you can see what he's aiming at there. There is a similarity, isn't there? He acknowledged 14 children, though there may be more. The known ones are 2 with Kitty Jarman, 4 with Susie Boyd, 3 with Catherine McAdam, 2 with Bernadine Coverley. Apparently Bella Freud is a very famous fashion designer now, though I haven't heard of her. And Esther Freud is a quite well-known writer too. Then there's a son with Jaquetta Elliott, Frank Paul, the son of Celia Paul, who wrote this recent article. He unfortunately committed suicide, I think, later in his life. And then Jane McAdam Freud, who was a daughter with Catherine McAdam. Now this is Lady Caroline Blackwood, painted in 1952, near the start of their marriage. Each hair on her eyebrows and head is recorded with a fine sable brush. I think that's a really good painting. It's very much in a naturalist mode, and you'll see how he changes after he started a long friendship with Francis Bacon, the other very famous artist. These people were wild, all this set, the Bloomsbury set, but my goodness, they were talented as well, weren't they? But this is the one that came after this, which is Girl by the Sea. The sea is now become much more definite. Her profile is framed by turquoise water and a brooding sky. Her sad eyes are lowered, and Lucian has become compulsive. By then, he'd been compulsively unfaithful throughout the years of their relationship. He felt imprisoned by marriage, though the status of marriage was important to him. Caroline, in her sea-lit portrait, is longing to leave. She needs to be back on land, her mouth turned down. Well, which one do you like the best, actually? That one.
Second one.
At first, it doesn't seem as beautiful, does it? But there's something really interesting about it. This was Lucian Freud and Caroline Blackwood, just a photo of them in Madrid in 1953.
It's very nice looking, isn't
He is there, yeah. The loosening up of Freud's painting occurred while his marriage was breaking up. Because, as I say, Bacon advised him that he thought his work verged on illustration and advised him to give up drawing so his paint could take over. He would never marry again. He needed to free himself from emotional ties, and at the same time, he wanted to be liberated from painterly constraints. He gave up the sable brush for a hog-haired one. One's thin, and the other's got very, very thick bristles. A representation of vulnerability, or this is how Celia Paul describes it. She lies on her back on a white sheet, her claw-like hands clutched as if she was warding off an attack, her rib cages erupting from her skin like an alien life form. He turned away from realism, and his technique was becoming much more like expressionism. This was his last painting of Cuthbertson, but it's called Night Interior and dated 1968-9. She's a small figure in a large, desolate room. You can sense the silence. The big, dark, uncurtained window behind her is lit with mysterious reflections, though the bright light bulb in the ceiling, under which Freud must be standing, glares. The door of the cupboard is ajar, and you can see Freud's grey overcoat inside, suspended on a hanger, a signal that it was time to leave. Freud was in love with someone else. Chiquetta Elliott was his next great love. She was an heiress. He seems to specialise in heiresses. Renowned for her beauty. The paintings he made of her are full of intensity, and she obviously mattered to him at the time anyway. At the same time as he was falling in love with Elliott, he started to paint his mother, who's in the front of this one, Lucy Freud. It was only after she attempted suicide after her husband's death 2 years earlier that he was able to paint her. She lost interest in the world and stopped worrying about her son. This lack of concern liberated him. That's Freud at the time, and that's Chiquetta Elliott. That's his last portrait of Chiquetta Elliott, and it was never finished. In
I like that.
It's lovely though.
They split up in 1975, and this was 4 years later. Their relationship had been too tempestuous to last. They both had affairs. They made each other jealous. This was sexually stimulating but unsustainable. The painting of her, known as Last Portrait, is unfinished. It's a painful image of loss and grief. He took a long time to get over her.
Gosh.
And this is Katie McEwen. And this one is particularly aggravating in a way. Katie was 16 when Lucian started sleeping with her. She was a talented artist, the daughter of friends. In this portrait, she looks tragic. Her eyes show absolute despair.
She does.
For Celia Paul, this is the saddest and most haunting of all his portraits. When Katie and Lucian separated, she went on to a role at the Slade School of Art, where Celia Paul was also a student. Moving on to Celia Paul, if you remember the picture of her in the earlier one, that is the picture of her when she was a young girl. And this is her comment on it, Celia Paul's comment on it. I'd been going out with him for 2 years. I'd met him when he was a visiting tutor at the Slade when I was 18 and he was 55. At the time, he had fathered at least 12 children. I was 20 when I started sitting for him. He told me he preferred to have sex with strangers and that he abhorred the monogamy. He needed to turn me into a stranger so that he could paint me. Naked Girl with Egg is a cruel objectification. I'm showing lying on a black bed sheet. One hand cups my full breast, the other is raised to my excruciated face. A halved boiled egg sits in a white dish on a marble top table. The brown swirling veins of the marble echo in my pubic hair, and the egg resembles my breasts. This is 1983-85. Celia Paul was wearing a blue and white nightshirt that Lucian had bought for her specifically to do this painting. It was in brushed cotton, if you want to know the details. It was very soft and comfortable. My head is resting on the curve of the sofa arms and one hand lies close to my face. I radiate peace. The painting, I think, is an image of love. It took 2 years to finish. During that time, I got pregnant and gave birth to our son, Frank Paul. After the birth, a distance started to impose itself between Lucian and me. After I had Frank, I became less available as a sitter. I was also gaining recognition as an artist and had my first solo show in 1986. Susanna Chancellor. In this one, she can see is a profile of sitting on the studio bed in front of a pile of paint rags. 2 whippets are lying at her feet and she's resting her hand on the one turned towards the viewer. The dog is more acutely observed than Susanna, whose face is in shadow and half hidden by hair. She was to remain Lucian's companion for the rest of his life, and he painted her often. Somehow this is to Celia Paul. She might be wrong on this, but none of the portraits of her has the same stamp of urgency, an unforgettable urgency, of the painting as the paintings of Kitty, Caroline, Jacquessa, Lucy, or perhaps even of me, that is Celia Paul. Just to show there was at least some equal opportunity nudity.
Oh God.
As he got older, he did more of men than women. And these, I just think these are staggering portraits, actually, the ones he did of it. His most successful paintings for this period were of men. The paint remained thickly applied, but acquired more energy and freedom. Naked Man on a Bed is a portrait of the artist and writer Angus Cook. It is compassionate, softly lit with a pearly pink glow. There appears to be mutual trust and understanding. Lee Bowery. He sits naked on a red velvet chair. One leg is draped over the side of the chair. The foot of the other leg rests on the bare floorboards. He's looking straight at the viewer. One eye is lit up, one eye is in shadow. He is being diagnosed with AIDS. His expression shows that he is facing death. There is nothing he can do to survive. His acceptance gives the painting its spiritual force. This is the last painting he was doing when he died. It's of David Dawson. It was a large painting. He worked on it for 4 years, and even in the weeks immediately before his death, when it was left unfinished on the easel, depicted from a point of view directly above the sitters are Freud's long-term assistant and model David Dawson and Eli Dawson's whippet. I find its incompleteness poignant, indicative of a lifetime of unwavering commitment to the process of painting, and a testament to the enduring love and trust that Lucian could feel for men. There's Celia Paul with him in 2010. Anybody else got a view on him?
I think the more you admire the work, the less you admire the man.
Yes.
I think he's a tremendous artist, but I think pretty flawed human being, really. But maybe
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. But,